So my three New Year's resolutions: number one, sign veteran George Springer for leadership. I want to make this super clear. George Springer is not a free agent this offseason, but he is a free agent next offseason, which is still in the 2026 calendar year. So I mentioned this a few years back when it was Alex Bregman's year to become a free agent and he was entering the final year of his contract with the Astros. That was actually one of my New Year's resolutions. The Tigers need a veteran leader. I think they've been missing that for too many years. You look inside that clubhouse. Yes, Matt Vierling is a leader. Yes, Jake Rogers is a leader. Yes, Tarek Skubal, in a way, is a leader. But I don't think they have that true leader that's going to give them that day in, day out performance on the field, but also have a been there, done that type of a mentality with that veteran presence. Like there's just a lot that somebody like an Alex Bregman or a George Springer would bring to a team like the Tigers, especially with as many young players and up and coming players that they have. I just think about George Springer as a mentor to a Riley Green and a Max Clark coming up. I just think about how valuable that could be, not only for the Tigers when they have a guy like George Springer, but also even when George Springer is, ridden off into the sunset, how much of an impact that could have on the careers of a Riley Green and a Max Clark specifically as outfielders, but also other players as well. We know for leadership, the best fit is Alex Bregman, but if the Tigers don't sign him this offseason, after they finished runner up for him last offseason, I do think George Springer emerges as that next best fit once he gets to free agency after the 2026 season. And it's a good fit for the Tigers because AJ Hinch loves him. Like AJ Hinch has this long-standing relationship with George Springer. It's unmatched among active players. It's almost like a father-son type of relationship, if you will, between the two of them. Like that is how close AJ Hinch and George Springer are. So much so that when AJ Hinch came to manage the Tigers, he tried to recruit George Springer to sign with the Tigers. And of course, George Springer eventually signed 6 years, 150 million with the Blue Jays, and he becomes a free agent again in November 2026. But AJ Hinch wanted George Springer to join the Tigers. And instead, we saw the Tigers end up getting a different option there for the outfield. It was a shorter term deal. But AJ Hinch wanted George Springer. And I think that in a world in which George Springer is entering his age 37 season at that point, you're not going to have to give him a long term deal. So it could fit exactly what Scott Harris wants. We haven't seen the Tigers go out and sign a position player in free agency beyond 1 year. And if George Springer is entering his age 37 season, it's not going to be more than a 2 year deal for a guy like that. Maybe high AAV, but it's not going to be more than a 2 year deal. So I think it's perfect both for AJ Hinch and for Scott Harris. And I think the leadership would really benefit the Tigers. The second thing, extend top prospect Kevin McGonigal. That is number two on the New Year's resolution list, just because, look, smart teams, they extend their rising stars. We've seen five players in MLB history. They've received contracts of 100 million or more at age 21 or younger. That's Ronald Acuna Jr., Roman Anthony, Jackson Merrill, Wander Franco, and Julio Rodriguez. Those are the five players to get 100 million or more at age 21 or younger. Kevin McGonigal, he turns 22 in mid-August. So let's get a long-term deal done for Kevin McGonigal before he turns 22 in mid-August. I think that could be right around the time that he makes his MLB debut if he's not on the opening day roster. But this guy is the number one prospect for the Tigers, the number two prospect in all of baseball. He's the real deal. He's proven himself all the way along the line. And you talk about last, the episode we had last 2 weeks ago, and we talked to Dan Zimborski from Fangraphs. He's a creator of the Zips projection system. And the Zips projection system, that projects Kevin McGonigal to be like Alex Bregman, Mookie Betts, Gary Sheffield. Those are some of the names tied to Kevin McGonigal. So I think if there's a number two on the list for me, it's got to be extending Kevin McGonigal. He's the real deal. And additionally, the Tigers haven't committed to McGonigal on the opening day roster. It seems like they want to start him at AAA Toledo because they want to prioritize his development. So we know McGonigal is going to come up at some point in 2026, but there's this uncertain timeline. I think that could create some leverage for the Tigers in contract negotiations if we do get to mid-August and Kevin McGonigal really wants to play in the big leagues. The Tigers could dangle a contract extension in front of him and get him to grab at it, kind of like they did with Colt Keith. Now, it's going to cost a lot more, I think, to get Kevin McGonigal than it did to get Colt Keith to sign a long-term extension. but I think the negotiating tactics could be similar. And then number three, and I know I've listed them George Springer, Kevin McGonigal, and now this, but this may be number one because the Tigers need to prepare for life without ace Tarek Skubal. Tigers don't have any pitching. They don't have a number two starter, as you mentioned. And when Tarek Skubal becomes a free agent for 2026, what does it look like for the Tigers? You're looking at a rotation without Skubal and, by the way, without Casey Mize and Jack Flaherty, both impending free agents as well. You're going to have Jackson Jobe, Reese Olson, and Troy Melton in 2027. That's just not enough. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Jackson Jobe doesn't miss enough bats. Reese Olson, there's injury history. Troy Melton, there's reliever risk. And then the bigger concern beyond that is the Tigers don't have a top-ranked starting pitching prospect in their farm system. Andrew Sears, as a left-hander, he's number 14 in the organization according to MLB Pipeline, and he's generated a lot of internal buzz as this underrated arm to watch, but even he struggled in Double-A. So there's no guarantee there, and he has a lot to prove before he joins the Tigers, and he's already 23 years old. So Andrew Sears is as much of a question mark as anybody, even though he's generating some of this internal buzz as an underrated starter to watch out for. So I don't think the Tigers are prepared for life without Skubal, but it's not too late to fix that problem. They have to do it in the 2026 calendar year. They cannot wait until Tarek Skubal is gone to fix this problem. I think it's a prospect for prospect type of a trade where you're leveraging your offense first position players who struggle defensively, guys like Josue Briseño, Thyron Lorenzo, Max Anderson, and go get an MLB ready starter capable of joining the rotation in the second half of 2026. The next best option, go spend in free agency. Just sign a number two starter who you can count on both this season and next season. Or if you want to wait a year and Tarek Skubal is going to go be a free agent, like go sign the next best starter in free agency and do your best to replace him. Either one of those ways works. I think it's a prospect for prospect trade. It is signing a big name starting pitcher in free agency. But the Tigers aren't going to do either of those two things because we know they don't like to spend and we know they don't like to trade their prospects. Then just trade Tarek Skubal for pitching prospects, because the reality of the situation is the Tigers, they have to solve this problem where they have to backfill for the loss of Tarek Skubal, and that plan can't just hinge solely on Jackson Jobe replacing Tarek Skubal as the ace, because that's not good enough. There needs to be a long-term plan in place, and it's got to be put in place within the next 10 months. And if to do it, you got to trade Skubal for pitching prospects, so be it, because the Tigers just don't have enough to support themselves in a world without Tarek Skubal, and the clock continues to tick. So those are my three. We've got George Springer, Kevin McGonigal, and Tarek Skubal. I think those are three really big talking points going into 2026.
Let me just pop in real quick about George Springer. I know people might think like, oh, he's going to be too old, he's over the hill, but that's the exact same age, 37, when the Tigers signed Torrey Hunter back in 2013 as their kind of veteran leadership right fielder, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So I like that one, and of course, I'm all in on bringing McGonigal in forever and finding pitching. I already said so. Yeah, those are good. I think we've resolved to make the Tigers better this year.